Now, to really take advantage of the knowledge we have on eccentric work now is to make
A systematic review from 2017 conducted by Schoenfeld and his colleagues set out to figure out whether or not eccentric or concentric work was superior for hypertrophy. And it turns out that eccentric work might be superior to concentric work when it comes to building muscle, but there are some limitations. But before we get into that, let's talk about what concentric and eccentric work actually is.
Okay, now a concentric contraction is when the muscle activation happens and the tension happens when the muscle shortens. And an eccentric activation is, or eccentric work, is when the tension happens on the muscle as the muscle lengthens or as it extends. So look at it this way. When you're trying to lift the weight, so when you're trying to push the weight up, if you're trying to lift it, that is concentric work. But if you are trying to hold back, then that is eccentric work.
Now, back to the study. Schoenfeld and colleagues looked at 15 different studies comparing concentric and eccentric work in healthy adults. The results consistently showed that eccentric training was superior to concentric training in muscle growth, with an average gain of 6.8% muscle growth for the concentric groups and 10% muscle gain for eccentric groups. So does that mean that we have to cut out concentric work altogether and only do eccentric work? No, because in our everyday lives we use concentric, isometric and eccentric work, and even more so in sports. Schoenfeld and colleagues concluded that you have to train both concentric and eccentric, but we have to keep a focus on that eccentric part of our training. So how do you implement this in your training?
Have you ever heard about workout tempo? That basically means that you have certain number of seconds that you have to spend in each phase. Now, to really take advantage of the knowledge we have on eccentric work now is to make the eccentric phase a bit longer than the concentric phase. That could be something like 2-0-4, which means 2 seconds in the concentric phase, then 0 break at the top, and then 4 seconds down in the eccentric phase. That is a great way to put in some eccentric work or put in some extra eccentric load in your training protocol as it is. Just think about the tempo. Think that when you are doing the eccentric phase, it has to be at least as long as the concentric phase, and you could even make it a bit longer to be sure that you're doing it controlled, which also minimizes the risk of injury, but also to take advantage of those extra gains. You might be lifting less this way because it becomes harder, but put your ego aside and then think to yourself that you are not doing a bro split, you are building mass with science.